Hi, everyone. This is Derek Harp, the founder and chairman of the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International, or as we call it, just CSAI. CSAI is a 501c6 nonprofit workforce development association dedicated to helping grow, support, and sustain the professionals charged with the cybersecurity of control systems. We're specifically talking about those systems that have pumps and valves and actuators, real cyber to physical moving parts, and control nearly every aspect of our modern connected industries. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. It is my hope you find it inspirational or motivating or revealing or informative, and perhaps at times even a little entertaining. Take care and be well.
Hi, this is Derek Harp here, the founder and chairman of CSAI and the host of the CSAI podcast show. And I've got Chase Richardson on with me today. He's a VP of consulting at Bridewell, and Bridewell has a long history in industrials, and so they have services in across the whole spectrum of cybersecurity, certainly including operating technology. And they've come out with an amazing report. It should be available if anybody's listening to this, at the same time. And it is focused on cybersecurity in the U.S. Critical infrastructure. So Chase, welcome back. I know you and we've done a podcast or two before, but today I just wanted to talk about this report. I saw that it was, going to be coming out, and it's obviously clearly right in the wheelhouse of CSAI's, interest of critical infrastructure. What can you tell us about the project, what led to it, and we'll get into it a little bit.
Okay, yeah, sounds good, Derek. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on again. Great to chat today. So yeah, we're super excited about this report. So we've been publishing a US and UK report around cybersecurity and critical infrastructure for the last few years. And so we're excited to share 2024 vision of what the industry's seeing as far as the trends. And these aren't just kind of a dart throw as far as the trends are concerned. These are real insights from CISOs and cyber managers and IT and OT across critical infrastructure sector. So really excited to share some insights so that everyone that's in those sectors, whether it be manufacturing, energy, oil and gas, utilities, et cetera, that they can have some insights of what's happening not only to them but also just generally in the industry.
Yeah, so it's, I want to just go over quickly the content so that people who are listening, like, oh, I want to go look this out. So you obviously have the normal stuff, the forwards or the methodology used to gather the information, threat landscape, future events and threats, the regulatory horizon, which I want to touch on with you, internal business pressures, external business pressures, the future threat landscape, and then a conclusion to a 36-page report, chock full of data. You gave me an advanced copy, and I've been looking through it. It's got a lot of really interesting stuff in it. I'm going to want to study it myself closer. What jumped out at you in this? Anything particular so far?
Yeah, no, I I think we were thoughtful in how we opened up the paper and really just in the first few pages. I think one of the most eye-opening insights is that as far as actual threats, one of our first questions is, how many individuals, how many CISOs, cyber managers in critical infrastructure, how many have experienced an attack in the last 12 months, right? Very basic question. But there was a decrease in every category across the board. So as far as number of attacks, or we don't go into that, but just have you experienced any type of attack, whether it be phishing or malware or ransomware, data theft, you name it. But in every category, there was a decrease this year. So I think that that's kind of the silver lining. I know in cyber we're really doom and gloom sometimes. So I feel like just experiencing less attacks is a great sign. That being said, the sentiment, even though there were less individuals that were saying that they had experienced an attack in the last 12 months, the risk sentiment of am I at risk or is my organization at risk, and how do I feel like we're doing, it hasn't changed. In fact, it's increased. So the concern over cyber has stayed the same and actually increased a little bit. However, the actual numbers of cyber attacks and experiencing those cyber attacks has gone down. So I feel like it's a good trend, and that was eye-opening for me. I don't know if I would have said that coming into it.
Yeah, I noticed between 23 and 24, phishing went down by 37%. At least the reportees, the survey participants between the 2 years reported a big decrease in that, which is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. No, and that's maybe we're getting better. There's a lot of you could speculate, right? Are we getting better as organizations in order to, are we tweaking our rules in the right way to get rid of spam or phishing attacks, or have we implemented the right controls? That's conjecture, obviously, but I feel like it's definitely a silver lining to a report that says you should definitely keep you need to continue to keep the foot on the pedals, so to speak. But it's good to see that there's less organizations suffering from attacks.
Yeah, let me ask you a fundamental question that comes up. We find, we as you know, research and do reports as well, and do all the sessions, some of which you guys have been speakers at. And there are people who really push back and question. A few people specifically are like, there have been very, very few OT attacks. And so what is an OT attack? So if a company has operating technology and some part of their company is compromised, it has an effect that spills over into OT.
Yeah.
It's a pipeline attack maybe a few years ago. I say it's an OT incident, and as do others. I didn't make that up. That's what I graphed on. Say it had a spillover effect. It affected the operating technology. Even if human beings had to make decisions in there and decided to turn something off, to me, I just don't think the distinction is highly important. I mean, we want to understand the linkages, but to dismiss it and say it wasn't OT, like it was an OT incident in my book. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, no, I would echo that as well. I mean, so Bridewell focuses on critical infrastructure, and this report is just on the respondents to the report are all in critical infrastructure segments. And so because of that, we have a wealth of experience in that. And it's never just IT or just OT, right? There's always some sort of hybrid interplay. And as that are the networks segmented in IT and OT? Probably and most likely, yes, in order to keep those parts of the business segmented, definitely a best practice. But does it mean that there's just attacks on one or the other? Absolutely not. Yeah, it definitely spills over, and wherever it starts or however it affects, usually it affects both sides of the coin. So yeah, completely agree with that sentiment.
In your report architecture, it addresses some IT statistics and some OT statistics, not just OT. It's industrial companies and critical infrastructure, but it's really looking at the ramifications of different risk categories they have. It's not exclusively OT only.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not just asking critical infrastructure about their OT and about tax on OT. Yeah, we're talking to them about both.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about the regulatory horizon. And I love the timing of this because we have our June 5th symposium that's focused entirely on regulations and standards. And we're bringing in some of the founding committee members and chairs of the standards and regs themselves. In fact, that's our whole recruitment right now is you got to be intimate with one of these. And what was your, when did you serve versus people just sort of talking about those regs over there that they didn't have a hand in or those standards. And so we're going to break out rooms where people can sort of dive into a particular one. So talk about what that part of your report, the regulatory horizon.
Yeah, I think that, again, thinking about critical infrastructure and that supply chain, right, of critical infrastructure, wherever they land on that supply chain, we're seeing a few. So one of our main, within critical infrastructure, because there are 16 different segments, for critical infrastructure, we tend to just kind of glamor onto a couple here, and the majority of our clients are within a few of them. But one of them that we've been working a lot with recently in the last few years is aviation and with airports. And one of we asked a few questions of airport and aviation responders, how they're feeling about the TSA regulations now that we've been kind of making sure that the TSA is happy with how airports are following certain cybersecurity protocol for a little bit over a year now that they upped their regulation. And so we have seen an uptick in kind of the general sentiment of how airports are doing when it comes to those TSA regulations, and they have to do with around access controls and monitoring, and similar controls as any organization, but TSA called out a few in particular that they wanted airports to work on. And we are seeing that, half of them, 50%, are saying that they've accomplished what the TSA has put out. The other half are working up to it. I would say that although we don't talk about size of airports, I'd say for the most part, it's the small and mid-sized airports that don't have the the cyber budget that the big guys do that are still working on these. And then within that, where's the need? What are the primary actions that are required? First and foremost, training and educating staff on cybersecurity in an industry that, when you talk about security in aviation, almost everybody, you go to any trade show in aviation, and they're talking about physical security. And just recently, we've seen kind of a page turn where not only physical security should be important and should get the large part of the budget, but also digital security. And we've seen an uptick in that, and the TSA putting out those regulations has definitely benefited the industry as far as cyber is concerned. More individuals are taking a closer look at it. They're spending more. They're spending the resources in order to make sure that they're compliant with these TSA regs.
Hey everybody, Derek Harp here, and I just want to take a brief moment to thank 3 companies that make this podcast series possible. The first company is Waterfall Security Solutions, and they led the charge this year for the podcast, and they specifically sponsored it from their podcast, the Industrial Security Podcast. So check that out. That's a great linkage to an entire other series of over 100 episodes. They had their anniversary recently, focused on control system cybersecurity, and they were supported this year by KPMG and Fortinet. We could not do this without them. These companies not only have supported this podcast series this year, but they've supported CSAI since its very early days 8 years ago. And we're entirely grateful to the teams and dedicated professionals at Waterfall Security Solutions, KPMG, and Fortinet.
All right, so purely hypothetically, let's just compete the US against the UK and who is more progressive, in the area of cybersecurity regulation.
Yeah. No, that was
okay. It's page 25. How does it come out?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was, I would say, a close second as far as a surprising statistic that we found from this report and from our survey that we put out, is that in the US, we think that we're more regulated, or at least the respondents here are saying that they're more regulated. And I was shocked by that, just because historically, and Bridewell being, we've got our global headquarters is over in the UK, US headquarters here in Texas. And so I have colleagues, a lot of colleagues that work in cybersecurity in the UK. And as far as I'm concerned, I think the UK, again, personally, I think the UK has us beat as far as, what their standards are and what they're asking companies to do. But again, the respondents say that for the most part, the US market hasn't beat. And maybe that's because maybe a lot of these respondents are dealing with additional, like the TSA that I just mentioned, or CMMC that we're awaiting the final rule on. These are, I think we're putting out more measures recently, but I mean, the UK, the NCSC, GDPR for data privacy, they've been dealing with regulation for a while.
And maybe, it's interesting, privacy, I would have instantly said, without seeing any statistics, Europe would be leading regulatory stuff on privacy. California followed GDPR sometime later, and all this sorts of thing. But I wonder, in critical infrastructure, with NERC CIP being quite long developed, then maybe some of the critical infrastructure, cyber regulation, maybe some of the earliest movement in that area. And I don't know this to be true, but it might have been here in the United States. But I wonder over time, I know folks that are coming onto our June 5th event that we're doing on regs and standards, some of the folks on Rails that are going to talk about regular, Rails regulation, they're in Europe and, or in Israel, they're in other parts of the world. And, it's, and the Rail obviously is a sort of a unique and different infrastructure, in different parts of the world than it is here. But anyway, I wonder over time whether these will shift. You ask about that, sort of like there's a little bit of future gazing in there, and what people's expectations about it, potentially changing. And I don't know, I can see more regulations coming from other parts of the world as more and more sectors hop on. Now, medical just had one in the United States. And so that's sort of, new, and saying, if you're making medical devices, here's some stuff you've got to comply with. But over the world, where do they populate? So anyway, I think I thought that was fascinating. And I knew because of your, heritage of UK headquarters, but in US operations, the comparison between the two countries was interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting, honestly. That was one of the big takeaways. And we did this, we're right off the back of RSA, and we heard, some additional some additional news from the White House as far as, a renewed focus on cybersecurity. This was one of the first times that there was something like that since, the directive, a few years ago. And so I think that I'd be interested if that has changed at all since then, because it seems like there has been an even more of a push, even more of this renewed push to even more cyber regulation. I don't think that's going anywhere.
Probably not.
Maybe what that looks like changes, but I don't think the overall trend changes.
Yeah. I think I would concur with you.
Yeah.
Well, where do people find the report?
So yeah, you find us on our website, Bridewell.com. You'll be able to download the full report and get all these insights. And again, take some of this and hopefully apply that within your organization. Talk about it at a board level to talk about what, again, your peers are doing. I think it can be really, really insightful. That's one of the more common questions that we get as consultants working with a lot of organizations within critical infrastructure is, how are we doing? Right? Everyone's asking, are we spending enough? Are we doing enough? Are we as secure as we should be? And this helps, keep your finger on the pulse of the industry as far as cyber is concerned.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and we will host it in our new resource, our reports and papers library. Well, by the time somebody's listening, it should be hosted there. And so that'll be another place people can find it and search to it. And yeah, it's great. It's over 500 respondents participated, if I'm not mistaken. So it's got a really nice data set. So for statistical validity, even some sectors, I think you guys had a goal of over 100 in some of the sectors where you were going to draw some conclusions. And I always like to see that as a fundamental basis. You survey 3 people, and like the statistic results are like, yeah, does that really mean anything? But this is you guys put some real effort into it. So again, I'm just wrapping up with Chase Richardson, VP of Consulting at Bridewell, a firm focused on cybersecurity for critical infrastructure companies, both IT and to OT aspects of that. And this report is a blend of that. It is about cybersecurity for critical. In fact, let me rename it. The cybersecurity in the U.S. critical infrastructure. It's not just reporting on OT only related issues and statistics, but the comprehensive nature of critical infrastructure companies, which of course encompasses usually, both areas, if not all surfaces.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks for having me today, Derek. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Chase. Take care. See you soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Derek Harp, the founder and chairman of the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International, or as we call it, just CSAI. CSAI is a 501c6 nonprofit workforce development association dedicated to helping grow, support, and sustain the professionals charged with the cybersecurity of control systems. We're specifically talking about those systems that have pumps and valves and actuators, real cyber to physical moving parts, and control nearly every aspect of our modern connected industries. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. It is my hope you find it inspirational or motivating or revealing or informative, and perhaps at times even a little entertaining. Take care and be well.